So let's see. Old Masta Schneiderman was just sexually role-playing. He admits he was sexually role-playing as being a perverted pig. Well, you know, that's how Albany, New York, that's how New York kind of gets run, by a bunch of mobster pigs. Albany has been a sewer for an extremely long time. You see, folks, I grew up there in Warren County at Glens Falls and up on Lake George. And the very interesting thing about Lake George, New York, is all the more successful and wealthy mafia type families. They all like to water ski and snorkel and go camping and hunting and fishing and snowmobiling all around a good old Lake George, which makes Lake George kind of a, oh, I don't know, it's almost like a mafia mecca. Now, I don't want to name any names, but believe me, I could. They all, well, a lot of them, they spent an awful lot of time down in the village and up off the Bolton Road and up and around Diamond Point and over on the east side at everything from Sans Souci, and places like the Dunham's Bay Lodge and Lanfear's Country Tavern and every other beer joint and saloon in Lake George. Give a shout out here to good old Duffy's in Lake George Village. Now to the sheriff of Warren County, New York. You see, every time they flush that lake, the old up and down, up and down, up and down flushing scheme with the Lake George water levels to get rid of all that sewage leachate, all the septic tank squeezings, the cesspool leaching, if you will, into Lake George. Every single time they flush the lake by dumping a bunch of water out of it through the pinhole, they get rid of a certain amount of the polluted and contaminated water from places like the Sagamore and the, well, I don't want to pick on them. I'll leave them out of it. They're a pretty good group of people, but you've got everything from the Garrison to the East Cove and on and so forth, that all their sewer and septic for many, many years just leached, flowed through the groundwater into the lake. Lake George being Lake George being a large stone bedrock basin, or a great big stone bedrock bowl, 155,800 acres, something like that. It's 242 square miles. It's over 155,000 square acres, and it's drained through one single pinhole at the Lachute River. Now, the old Master Schneiderman there and Master Basil Sagos at Department of Environmental Conservation and Master Andy Cuomo, I want you to understand something about the up and down, up and down, up and down water levels on Lake George. It's all about flushing the big toilet. Every bit of what's gone on in the massive contamination and poisoning of South Bay, every bit of the poisoning and contamination of South Bay on Lake Champlain has by and large come from Lake George. The Lachute River and the Champlain-Hudson Canal there that comes up from the Hudson River at Fort Edward and Hudson Falls and Glens Falls via the Glens Falls Feeder Canal. Every single time Eric Schneiderman has sexual role playing with dumping all this sewage, folks. Lake George has become massively contaminated with sewage leachate. Lake George, New York is turning green. The reason it's turning green is it's met its tipping point, its saturation point. There's more sewage leachate around Lake George in the brown fields, the septic fields. I call them the brown fields of Lake George. Has saturated the ground around Lake George, New York. And there's more sewage leachate going in the lake than the wintertime drawdown, the flushing of the lake, can handle. It's becoming overwhelmed. So yes, I don't know, between 2 and 4 million, something like that, people go up to Lake George and take a bath. You know, every year. It's a great big bathtub is what Lake George is. You go up there and you get in your bathing suit and you take a bath. And all this contaminated and polluted water is being flushed. Every time they flush that big toilet, they're destroying docks and marinas and docks and islands and shoreline and seawalls and, oh gee, golly whiz, boathouses. So Governor Cuomo and to the newly appointed Solicitor General of the state of New York, all this up and down water that's going on Lake George, that's what destroyed my parents' business. That's what destroyed a lot of people's docks and boathouses and shoreline and the islands. I'll give a tip of the hat to Ellen Brown Apperson and all the other people that have tracked the history of the mill pond, the giant trespassing case. They call it the Lake George trespassing cases. So, Andy Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, just so you'll know, that's why you're being sued in federal court. That's why we're in the U.S. Supreme Court with the state of New York, because they're engaging in sexual role playing with the toilet bowl levels on Lake George. Folks, I think I'm going to leave it right there, and you can find all the facts and the photographs and the history at the poisoning of Lake Champlain and the poisoning of Lake George. It's all over the world. The story's out. The horse done left the gate, as they say down at Saratoga. The genie is out of the bottle, as they say, in the saloons and the beer joints all around Lake George. Folks, we're leaving it right there, and as always, hasta la vista. God bless, and you betcha, we definitely be coming back.